Welcome to Christ Table. So glad that you are here with us today as we are continuing on our Bible study in Ancient Paths. If you'd like to know more about Christ Table, well, my name's Kevin Young and I am lead clergy here at Christ Table, and you can find out more about us at that URL right there, www.christstable.today. Now, if you'd like to know more about the Bible study specifically, then visit that URL right there, go.christstable.today/ancientpaths. There are a couple of resources there that we're offering to you for free. One is a PDF download of every day of the study so that you will know when the study is happening, as well as all of the reading schedules for it. It is a very simple study as well. The readings are very easy, and we would love to have you be a part of that. But there's one more thing there that is available to you for absolutely free. You don't have to pay for it or anything. There is a PDF version for free of this curriculum that walks you through every single day of the study and gives you study questions, gives you some journaling space in there. One of the ways that a lot of people and families use this is around the dinner table, or they will do it in community groups or with neighbors. And this study helps give you some background to have the conversations with other people. And then the questions give you a place to go with your kids, with your partner, with your community as well. And so you can download that for free right there at go.christstable.today. Now, what we're doing through this study is we're spending 6 weeks looking at 6 different spiritual practices. Last week, we looked at prayer, the liturgy of the hours. This week, we're looking at the topic of saints, and we have 4 more that we'll get to over the next 4 weeks. But like I said, today we're closing out this conversation about saints. Now, if you haven't been with us throughout the studies this week, this is going to be a bit of a refresher for those of you who have. For those of you who haven't, you may have a difficult relationship with this idea of saints. Well, part of that is because many of us have kind of been indoctrinated about things that were maybe partially true, but not completely fully true. So let's agree on our definition of saints. And this is the definition of saints that has been agreed upon and that has been foundational throughout the entirety of church history. Saints are people who are celebrated for their dedication to the Christian life, as well as many of them for the suffering that they endured as a result. Many people were named saints or were called saints because they were martyrs in the early church. But not just that, what we see in Scripture, and we saw this in the first day or two of the study as well, and if you missed those, you can go back and see this, is that Jesus and Paul uses specifically the word saint to describe both the entire group of people who are followers of the way, but also Jesus himself seems to utilize this word saint to describe a smaller group of followers of God who were spiritually maybe more mature, or who were set apart, or who were different. So we have a lot of context both in the Bible and in the early church for saints being a positive thing when used in a positive way. And so that's kind of where we are on this study, and that is foundationally kind of the look that we have taken and the stance that we've taken on this as we have gone through this, is that it may well be that this idea of examples to imitate, we spoke about that yesterday with Paul. Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. If you need an example, look to my example of what a life fully devoted looks like. This is what saints are. And so today, what I want to do is I want to zero in just a little more specifically on something that we yesterday kind of hinted at, but today I just want to kind of go fully and deeply into it. We're going to have one text today. It's a very simple text. This verse should be very familiar to many of you. Proverbs chapter 22, verses 5 and 6. And when we come to the book of Proverbs, one of the things that is important for us to recognize is that the Bible is a collection of writings from many different individuals written over a very extended amount of time, thousands of years, for different purposes, for different audiences, all kind of bound together into one book. What we recognize whenever that happens is different parts or different writings in the Bible are attempting to do different things. There's poetry, there's parable, there's apocalypse, there's gospel, there's first person letters being written to groups of people, there's letters being written to individuals. Sometimes it's difficult for us to identify how some of these should be taken, what literary genre or what literary category that they're in. Proverbs is not one of those places. Proverbs is like opening up a fortune cookie at the end of a great meal at a restaurant and reading that proverb that's in there. Is it true? Yes, it's true. Is it always true in all times and in all places and in all ways? That's not the point. A proverb is something that is generally true, stereotypically true, or something that is proverbial. That's where we get the word Proverbs, right? So we don't want to treat the book of Proverbs, anything in the book of Proverbs, the way we might treat a technical science manual, or the way we might treat an engineering manual, or the way we might treat the book of Romans or Galatians. It's trying to do something different. It was written for a different purpose, to be Proverbs, not to be the book of Romans. What that means is we're going to come up against great advice, which by and large, in general circumstances, is a great rule of thumb, but breaks down in the exception. And there are exceptions to all of the Proverbs. So, with that intro, and now you'll know why I gave that intro. Proverbs 22, verses 5 and 6. Corrupt people walk a thorny, treacherous road. Do they, though? They do. Do they see it? Not always. Does every corrupt person walk a thorny and treacherous road? Sometimes it seems kind of blessed. Sometimes they seem pretty happy. We might say, well, deep down somewhere on the inside, no. You sure? Whoever wants to value life will avoid the thorny, treacherous road that corrupt people take. So direct your children on a different road, on a different path, Proverbs says. And when they're old, they'll not leave it. This verse has given a lot of young parents a lot of hope. This verse has given a lot of middle-aged parents whose kids are in their adolescence, 20s, 30s, 40s, and may have left the right path. A bit of hope in the midst of a lot of lack thereof. For a lot of aging parents who are reaching the end of their race, this verse feels like a punch in the gut. For some parents, it never came true. They pass hoping that after their lifetime that the kids, some point or other, will return to the path that they were shown when they were young. Do people return to the right path later in life? Absolutely. Do a lot of people? Absolutely. Do most people? I'm even going to be charitable and gracious and say absolutely. Does everyone 100%? I think I got to be honest and say no. This is why we have to treat the book of Proverbs differently. taking what we can, but not forcing it into a structure where it has to remain true in every situation, in every scenario, in every household. So if we take that requirement away, we're able to look at this verse in this text maybe with a little bit more honesty and sincerity. Corrupt people walk a thorny and treacherous road. Whether they see it or not, it's thorny, it's treacherous, and they may avoid all the thorns and the treachery of it. But most people don't, and it's a risk. And whoever truly values life is they're going to avoid that kind of risk. Direct your children onto the right path. And whenever they're older, they'll not leave it. The interesting thing is that second verse, verse 6, is oftentimes removed from verse 5. And even this I've taken out of the surrounding context. But I think it's fascinating that whenever it's paired with verse 5, it tends to give us a sense that it may not be the children's path who is at play here, but it's the parent's path that is at play. That it's the parent who is in danger of walking a thorny and treacherous road unnecessarily and not valuing life. And because of that, that has an effect on their kids. And so the only way to really direct your children onto the right path is really maybe, frankly, for you to be walking a better path to begin with, right? When they're older, they're going to be set in their ways. They're not going to want to leave the path that they're on. So why do I say this? What does this have to do with saints? Well, we've talked over the last few days about how important it is for us to recognize that we can be saints, that we are saints, and that it's important for us to recognize that other people can be saints and that other people are saints as well, and to begin to build bridges with other people by example. That's what's going on in this text. It is parenting by example. It's living like a saint so that your children, or the next generation in general, will be able to live a life worthy of being called or seen as being saintly as well by the generation that follows them. It's important for us to give our next generation examples of great lived faith. I had those in my life growing up, and I'm so thankful for those, that I was able to see that in the generation before mine and the generation before the generation that was before mine, through stories, through one-on-one interaction. There are also cautionary tales, stories, and my ancestors that were that thorny and treacherous path. If the only stories that I had were the thorny and treacherous path, if I hadn't had stories telling of where I had come from, what I could be, I don't know how things would have looked differently. But I think they would have looked different. There's a quote that I have picked up somewhere over the years that's very compelling to me. Richard Van de Wee said this, that spiritually engaged learners know that they're not alone in the world, that their hearts are connected with something or someone beyond themselves. This sense of unity works against the feelings of separation so prevalent in the world, and against the sense of loneliness many students feel in spite of cell phones and instant messaging. And so what I hear in this quote is simply this, is that if you want your children, if you want the next generation to be spiritually engaged, they need to know that they're not alone. And part of that is allowing them to recognize that it's not just you, it's not just your spouse, is the reason they're not alone, but because they come from a line of people who were great examples to look to, worthy to be imitated, saints. Some of those are in the Bible, some of those are in their blood, connecting them not just to something, but also connecting them with someone beyond themselves creates to build unity with them and with their faith, with them and with you, with them and their ancestors, with them and those who come behind them. But for our purposes, perhaps primarily their faith. And whenever they feel connected to something, embedded in something, whenever we feel connected to something beyond ourselves, something greater than ourselves, it works to mitigate the loneliness of life. This is the power of saints. This is the power of great lived examples of faith. It combats loneliness, which is perhaps most prevalent, most often in adolescence. With this, we'll close. Thomas Merton said this, and I think that this is a phenomenal way to wrap up this week. And if you don't recognize that name, Thomas Merton, or if you recognize it and you're not quite sure who he was, or do yourself a favor, for homework or extra credit, do a deep dive on Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton said this, though: "For me to be a saint is to be myself." And this truly, I think, is coming full circle, is bringing us fully into this idea of why we imitate. We imitate and emulate in order to identify who we are and how God has wired us, and to make us comfortable in the skin that God has given us. For me to be a saint is to be myself. And I'm not sure that there is any higher hope or any higher call for the follower of Jesus than to be made fully alive into who they were designed to be. I've come, John 10:10, Jesus says, so that you may have life and have it more abundantly. To be fully human. To be fully human is to be fully who God created you to be, and to resonate in both melody and in harmony with your Creator. Until next week.